about, and we know for sure that there is a virus amongst us. It's present in the society, in country, in the world. What we don't know is that, is the virus going to go away on its own? Or if yes, when? And if no, then the only option is vaccine. But where is the vaccine? Assembly line, production line is ready. Factories are being set up. Companies are calculating how many billions of doses they will require. Developing countries are already placing orders because they know that the initial production would be less. Billions of dollars are being pumped into the research to find a vaccine. But the billion-dollar question is, where is the vaccine? And then it's related to economy. There is a growing feeling among health experts and even economists. Economic officials think that full recovery, economic recovery depends on the scientists. Health experts caution that any vaccine is going to take a long time. Meanwhile, millions and millions of jobs have been lost across continents. If we talk about India, there is an estimate that at least 14 crores jobs have been lost since March. Similar is the situation in developing countries, and so is the situation in developed countries. Developed countries have a better social security net, which is absent in developing economies. The problem is jobs are being lost. There are pay cuts. There are layoffs. And it is having a major economic pressure on a large section of population across the world. It is having a major social and economic challenges that it is throwing up. To discuss this, we have a very eminent panel today, fantastic panel of economists, doctors, journalists. None of them need any introduction, but for the sake of it, I'll just talk about all six of them in a couple of sentences. Joining me from Virginia is Professor Sudipto. He is Professor Sudipto Sarangi. He is an expert on developmental economics. He has a keen interest in network development, a prize winner economics for his study on the historical origins of gender inequality. Joining us from Massachusetts is Professor Dipankar Bose, Department of Economics. Dr. Verghese, Matthew Verghese of St. Stephen's Hospital certainly needs no introduction, on the front line of fight against Corona, named real life hero by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Soumitra Pathare from Pune. He is a consultant psychiatrist, director, Center for Mental Health, Law and Policy at Indian Law Society. Mr. Rajesh Kumar Jha. He is Prasar Bharati special correspondent from Dhaka. He will be joining, he is already joining us from Dhaka. And Mr. Ashutosh Pandey, financial correspondent and editor of Deutsche Welle News Network. He is joining us from Bonn, Germany. So set the let's set the ball rolling, and let's deal. Though the topic is virus, vaccine, and economy, but I will go in the reverse order. First, let's settle the question of economy. Professor Somit Sarangi, my first question to you is, given the situation at the moment, COVID-19 has indeed disrupted economies across the world. There is a complete breakdown of economic activities. Uh, Developing countries, developed countries, all the economies are bleeding. They are in the red. The growth is negative. There is absolutely no immediate solution in the sight. As a professor of economics, how do you assess the situation at the moment, and what would be your prescription to come out of it?
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I first want to say good evening, everybody. And I also want to say hello to my fellow panelists. And I think I'm going to start with a caveat, which is true not only for me, but for everybody. I think, no one has all the answers. Okay? Whether we are experts or not, I certainly don't consider myself one, and I certainly don't have an answer. Second, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't look into the future to tell you what will happen. Third, the last such event that happened was the great influenza epidemic of 1918, which means there are hardly any people living with a memory of what has happened, okay? Which puts us in a very, very difficult situation. Why? Because we have three types of uncertainties. We have the biological uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen to the cure. We don't have a cure or a vaccine. We also have economic uncertainty because we don't know when this cure will come. And third, there's the combination of these two. So given all that, the best we can do, in the words of Herbert Simon, Nobel Prize winner, would be following procedural rationality. That is, given that we don't know what is the best solution, we try to find things that are close to what we have seen and follow that. Okay? So procedural rationality by definition means that we can make mistakes. So that's another thing. Just today morning, I was looking at the cases. Globally, there are 8.36 million cases. India, there are more than 367,000 cases and over 12,000 deaths. Interestingly, the real number that matters is deaths per 100,000, and which is less than 1 in India, so 0.8. By comparison, if you look at the US, it's 35 per 100,000. And if you look at UK, it is 63 per 100,000. So these, in that sense, India is doing a little bit better. And in fact, you could say that, in some ways, maybe we locked down too early. One thing is for sure, the virus is here to stay. Nobody is safe. Greenland has positive COVID cases. Fiji has positive COVID cases, right? So definitely, scientists in Antarctica are following social distancing. So this is not going away. What has happened is everybody locked down, and then now everybody realizes, okay, we can't stay in lockdown mode forever. We need to start opening up. What does that really mean? What it really means, the way I think about it is, it got hot outside. So there was summer, the room got hot, we switched on the AC. The room became cold. That is lockdown. It's mechanical. Nobody can take credit for it. If we follow lockdown, the room will cool down. But you switch off the AC, the room will get hot again. Moreover, it's hot outside. Summer has not gone away, which means if you want to step outside the house, you have to remember to drink water. You have to remember maybe to wear your sunglasses, maybe to wear a hat or an umbrella, whatever. You need protection. You need to be careful. You need to follow rules. So when the lockdown ends, that's when the real story starts for people. That is, when the governments end lockdown, as most economies in the world are doing, that's when the beginning of citizen responsibilities really, really starts. So we have to be careful about how we do things, how we follow things. That's the world we live in today. The virus is here. Lockdowns are typically over. There may be a second wave and there may be follow-up lockdowns. But regardless, the minute we take away lockdowns, everybody has to be responsible for behavior. Okay, so these things are obvious. I mean, there's no question about that. What we really need to think about is, why do the governments end lockdown? Well, human beings are social creatures. Nobody is going to live in isolation forever. So we're going to end lockdowns. But the real problem is, just take the argument to the limit. If we stayed locked down forever, even if the government start giving people money to spend, if we are locked down forever, there is nothing being produced. What are you going to spend that money on? If you follow Keynesian policies, right? So there are people who are against Keynesian policies. I think these are times when you need Keynesian policies. If we have Keynesian policies, if no output is being produced, what is the good of that fiscal stimulus package? What is the good of people? What is the good of doing things with which we have nothing to spend on? That's just going to create inflation. What are some of the consequences of a pandemic like that? First, the impact on the poor is obviously unequal. We all know that. We have all seen that. The other thing I'm going to contend is that the impact on women is also unequal. And quite possibly, I will speculate that the impact on the girl child is also more than on the male child. The other thing we should think about is, okay, how is this going to affect the urban landscape? Because office buildings are lying vacant. This is definitely going to have impact on the future work. So telework, vacant office buildings, rent on those office buildings, rent on malls, all these things are going to change the urban landscape. Then the other big issue is, how do you provide a workforce for the factories? Especially in India, migrant workers have gone back. How do you get them back? Will they come back, right? Because we know from history that people who have lived through difficult times like World War II or the Great Depression tend to have very risk-averse attitudes. They tend to have less trust in others. This is well documented. So given that these people have gone through such a difficult experience to go back to their homes or villages, few hundred kilometers apart, or a few thousand kilometers away sometimes, is it true that they will come back? How do we provide the workforce in the cities? Does it really mean that we are entering the end of globalization? For instance, there's all this talk about boycotting Chinese goods right now in India. Can we really boycott them? If we really want to do something like that, most of us would probably not be able to use our computers because most of them have Chinese components in them. We need to think about in terms of the future of healthcare. What do we need to think about in terms of the future of education? Now, India has one of the lowest per capita budgetary expenses on these things. So obviously, this is something that also we have to think about, and these have to change. Kerala is a good model in this example, right? So Kerala has done very well dealing with the pandemic, but that's also partly because they've been doing very well in terms of investing in healthcare and education. The other thing that remains is, how do we get people back to work and ensure that employers and employees follow social distancing and safety protocols? How do we follow that? How do we ensure that employees follow safety protocols? How do we ensure that they do it outside the house, outside the workplace, right? Because you can go home and you have a party. Tomorrow you come to office, there is a problem. So these are some of the big issues that stand in front of us. I'm not going to provide big solutions to any of these, but I'm going to give some positive thoughts. First, we should think of this as an opportunity to rebuild, to do things correctly. For example, if the wiring in your house is bad and the wall breaks down in one part, treat it as an opportunity to do the rewiring. So we have been given an opportunity, whether we like it or not, to do some rewiring. This is also a time where we can learn from the experience of other countries. What this pandemic has done is it has shown us the strengths and weaknesses of every country. This is a time where we can learn lessons from the others. It's probably also a time to start thinking of pandemic planning, because these things are going to be more recurrent in the future. It's also a time to start thinking about pandemic emergency funds. We also need coordinated solutions. So everybody has to think about solutions and has to be on the same page for the solution. We need to invest more, as I said, on health and education. And we need, so one of the things that people talked about, when people talk about heroes for the country, they usually talk about soldiers. But this pandemic has made us aware of another type of heroes: doctors, healthcare professionals who are out on the front line, people who work in the farms, people who make sure that there is food on our table. These are the new kinds of heroes. And it is probably time that we realize, teachers, these are the new heroes. It's time to realize that there is more than soldiers to keep the country going, and recognize and respect these heroes. The final thing I want to say in this regard, I mean, I'm happy to take questions on some of these. I want to say in this regard is that this is a time when everyone has to be a hero. Has to be a hero because we have to follow safety protocols, and we have to be willing to sacrifice things in our lives to accommodate those safety protocols. In that sense, we all need to be heroes.
Thank you, Professor Sudipto Saragi, for your thoughts, and it was wonderful to have you on the panel. Hope to have you again for the entire duration of the webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I apologize. I have another commitment.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now it's time to go to another economist on the panel, Professor Dipankar Bose from Department of Economics, University of Massachusetts. Dipankar, my question to you is that given the situation at the moment, COVID-19 has disrupted the entire economic activities across the world. There is a theory going on that a production of a vaccine is a prerequisite to any economic revival. That unless a vaccine is found, produced, and there is a mass vaccination, then only normal economic activities can start. Do you concur with this view, or do you have a different point of view? Dipankar. Hello. Hello. I think we are having some issue with connection with Dipankar. So let me go to Dr. Matthew Verghese. Dr. Verghese.
My understanding is that the current crisis is a dual crisis. It is a crisis which emerged in the health sector, but then it has spilled onto the economic sector. And a correct response can only emerge when the two crises are addressed at the same time. Meaning you cannot deal with the health crisis without dealing with the economic crisis, especially in poor countries like India, where if the economy tanks, then it will increase the number of deaths, of non-COVID deaths. So we need to address the economy also. But the other aspect is that the economy cannot be really recovered unless the health aspect is also addressed, because people are also wary of going out and working because of the pandemic. So unless the pandemic is effectively controlled by public health interventions, the economy cannot be fully recovered. And as you rightly pointed out, right now we are looking at a long period when therapeutic interventions of either a vaccine or treatment might not be likely available. And so in this case, the public health interventions are the most important. And we we can look at many countries around the world to see what have been the correct public health interventions to reduce the spread of the disease. And sometimes some countries have even managed to actually reduce cases to zero. So there is evidence of how to do it right, and I think government should know.
Deepankar, if I take the logic further, we see that the number of cases are going up, especially in a country like India, in other developing countries. Africa is going to be depicted by World Health Organization as a very dangerous place in the next few months, and the casualty fatalities can go into hundreds of thousands. So, what would be still there is a opening up of the economy. You are in the United States right now, or in India, where there is a unlocking going on. In France, we saw it last week. The president of France announcing the resumption of economic activities. So, despite the cases ramping up, fresh cases are coming into the fall, but somehow the economic activities is being pushed through. Do you think is that the correct approach to fight the virus and revive the economy at the same time?
I think this is a very difficult question for governments, and there are both aspects. So, keeping the economy completely under lockdown for a long period is not feasible, because it reduces the amount of economic activity, it reduces income, it reduces welfare. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is that if you remove all restrictions and resume economic activities, that might lead to a surge of cases, which, if not properly handled, can lead to the previous scenario which we have seen, where healthcare systems get completely overwhelmed by the number of cases. So these two aspects have to be balanced, and it is a difficult choice. Individual countries will have to look at their own situation, own institutional structure, their own strength, to see how best to do it. So neither a complete lockdown, neither opening up without regard to the health aspects is the way to go. And it has to be modulated according to the needs of the country. And here, I think it is important to actually distinguish the developed countries from the developing countries, because developed countries generally have a larger social safety net. And so they are able to allow the workers to not go to work and yet not make them get into poverty and face hunger, which is not the case in a country like India, largely Africa, South America, South Asia. So in these countries which are poor, the emphasis on lockdown should be much less. And if there is a lockdown, I mean, many epidemiologists and public health experts suggest that yes, some form of physical distancing is necessary, but that should be used to build up health infrastructure, which can then take account of the cases which will come later. But I think the emphasis on lockdown should be less, and the necessity of the government increasing social safety net, especially to reduce the impact of reduced economic activity on the most poor and vulnerable, has to be kept front and center in a developing country like India. And I mean, there is some positive news on the vaccine front also. So there are at least 100 cases going on, clinical trials, etc., at various stages. And at least 2-3 are almost at phase 3, where they are starting human trials. So there is one vaccine developed by Imperial College London, another by Oxford University, and a couple of vaccines in China. And it is possible that by the end of this year or early next year, vaccines will probably be available, though it will take time for it to be mass produced and made available to people across the world. So we are certainly looking at a long period where other public health interventions will have to be kept going, and balancing economic needs and the health aspects, health needs, is really the key.
Okay, Dipankar, before I let you go, briefly, because you're a professor of developmental economics with a very keen interest in India, you have seen that there have been massive job losses, pay cuts, severe pressure, economic pressure on a huge chunk of Indian population. So, what would be, as an economist, what would be your advice or prescription to the government to bring the economy back? Because there is one theory: print more, put money into hand of the people, let the consumption grow. That could bring the economy back on track. Do you concur with that view, or you have a different point of view?
I think, to come out with correct prescriptions, we need to look at which sectors of the economy has been hit hardest. And there is a lot of evidence that the medium scale and the small and the micro enterprises have been hit the hardest. And there is a survey by the All India Manufacturers Association which say that up to 1/3 of the small and micro businesses might be devastated and go out of business. So that is the segment which requires most help. So I think credit has to be made available to the sector, the MSME sector. The government did make some credit available through its announcements, but I think a better option would be to just write off the total 5 lakh crore rather than to say, okay, 2 lakh crore, 3 lakh crore. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is that because of this severe livelihood loss, lot of informal sector workers have either lost their jobs, or if they do have their jobs, they have not got paid. So that has created a huge crisis of immediate need of cash and food. So universalizing the public distribution system and removing any necessity for ration cards, let everybody access it right now in the immediate period. That is one aspect. Second thing, I think increasing the cash transfer would be a good idea. So the cash transfer that was part of the initial package was only a 500 rupees, which is nothing. So increasing it maybe by 10-fold or 20-fold is certainly a good idea, along with universalizing the PDS. The third important thing is that the economy will also need to be supported on the supply side, because workers are not able to go to work. The amount of output produced in the economy is going to fall. So the government, in addition to increasing demand by cash transfers and making food available, the government has to look carefully at the supply side. And there, one important thing is looking at agriculture, what kind of needs are there. And I think all the reports suggest that it is positive, because sowing has gone on, and the government should make the procurement process smooth enough so that farmers don't face any problems of not being able to sell what they have produced. So I think both supply side and demand side need to be kept in mind. Most people are talking about the demand side, but in the medium term, the supply side will also be important. So making credit available and making sure that the agricultural sector is working properly would be additional things that the government should certainly do.
Thank you, Dipankar. Because Dipankar had to go suddenly somewhere, so this interview was recorded a bit earlier. In any case, let me take a leaf out of what Dipankar said, that physical and public health intervention. Dr. Matthew Verghese, you are known as someone who doesn't hold his punches back, who doesn't mince his words. What is your assessment of the situation? India is breaking its own record of positive cases every day. In the last 24 hours, India has recorded almost 13,000 cases, positive cases in 24 hours. Our fraternity has crossed 12,000 mark. Since unlocking has begun in the last 2 weeks, if we look at the figure, it's every day almost the number of positive cases that has come to the fore has crossed 10,000 mark. So if you look back till today and then come to today, what is your assessment? Did we go for a lockdown too earlier when the number of cases were less? The spread was not so big. We went for a lockdown. And when we are recording more than 10,000 cases every day, we are unlocking, we have unlocked almost everything. Has the strategy gone horribly wrong? Or you think that part of it was right, part of it was wrong? Dr. Matthew.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I've been listening to the discussion with interest. Economics is not my field. However, it is important to recognize, and this pandemic has made it very clear, health is the most important investment that you have for a sound economy of any nation. That's the first message that this pandemic has driven home. And I hope our politicians, our policymakers, and the bureaucrats come to terms with this realization. If we don't, then we have made a huge mistake forever. That's the first learning, that we always subjugated health expenditure, as they used to call, and I hate to call it expenditure. It is never an expenditure in health. It is it's the investment for all times to come. So that's the first thing we have to learn in this pandemic, that the health is an investment. That is the biggest learning in this pandemic, as far as I'm concerned, that the rest of the policymakers and bureaucrats and the experts should internalize. Having said that, there were 2-3 aspects here from the previous speaker that I would like to emphasize. Before I answer your question, I have a little problem of using the expression developing country and developed countries. I have a serious objection. If you were to look at developed civilizations, would you say a consumeristic civilization of the high economically evolved countries are better, or is a tribal living in a forest evolved environmentally far better than the person in the high income countries? So I'm changing the discussion point. The reference to developed and developing should change. Developed in terms of environmental sensitivity, environmental pragmatism, or undeveloped in terms of that. Therefore, I have a little problem with that expression to be used in an evolved group discussion like this. That's the first thing that I want to emphasize. The second thing, that health has been viewed as a technological fixture. So you have a disease and you have a technology and you find a fix for it, a technological fix for it. So average person thinks that the battle on tuberculosis was won by TB medicine. You would wonder, why am I coming to this? There is a relevance, I'll link it a little later. TB medicine is not the one which conquered TB in the high income countries, US and Europe. It was conquered by economic development. It is conquered by economic development. Look at the graph, look at the evolution of TB drugs. It was conquered by economic development. Of course, you have had a setback after the HIV virus infection globally. That's a small setback, which is different. But otherwise, that is the reason. Polio, I am known as a polio person. Polio was eradicated in the Western world not by vaccine, but by the use of a higher level of sanitation and safer water supply. When in countries like India and in countries in the Southeast Asia where we had failure to provide sanitation, failure to provide safe water, we found a technological fix of a vaccine. Where am I bringing you all to? I'm considering the last question, which is there, that where are we going ourselves? We've practically opened up. Did we do a lockdown in the right time? Well, at the time that we did the lockdown, perhaps it was all right. But I don't agree with the fact that the lockdown was essentially done to flatten the curve. I have a graph here. I don't know whether I can show it on this, whether it is visible or not. Probably not visible. Anyway, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If you see the graph till end of April, it was almost flat. They say the lockdown was done to flatten the curve. A curve which is already flat, there was no need to flatten it anymore. The subsequent curve in May, June has been a steep gradient. So did we do right? Yes, we did right at the time when we did, because we were not prepared for handling the pandemic. So we needed time to preparation. That preparation time was what is required for this to be done. And that lockdown was meant for that. And how much time did we need? The pandemic was declared by WHO on March 11th. We had our first lockdown on March 22, not too bad. Our cases were only 500 or so, 514 or so when we locked down. Not too bad at all. But could we have avoided it? That's the other issue which I'll come to. Yes, we could certainly have avoided it. I always say this because the disease did not come walking. It did not come by car. It did not come by truck. It did not come by train. It did not come by domestic airline. It came by international airline. When the flights from Wuhan and China and some of the international countries, Italy, where we knew they were the only places where the cases were coming on, we just needed to stop those international flights. And that everybody needed to be quarantined. If you look at the history of medicine, there has been no place where such a lockdown has ever been done in the history of medicine. We have never had this. We've created this lockdown, creating a huge social impact, a huge economic impact. But having said that, when we did it, yes, we needed it. When we did it, we needed to prepare ourselves, but with a clear endpoint. The problem was the policymakers that were guiding the politicians. I wouldn't blame the politicians. They are not experts in this field. The policymakers are the ones who are guiding them. They are the ones who should have told, look, you have a lockdown to prepare your hospitals, to prepare your beds, to create your ventilators, to create your large, massive pandemic welcoming minor cases and moderate cases areas like they are doing now, which is happening 3 months down the line. They are thinking of 10,000 bedded stadia, 1,500 bedded, exhibition grounds being converted, or railway coaches being converted. As it is happening now, that should have been happening there. And keeping the hospitals ready for the serious cases that are going to come on as the days went by. So we needed to have, yes, the lockdown with clear preparatory targets. 1, have policies for what is to be done. 2, standard operating procedures. 3, protocols for management of cases, mild cases, moderate cases, severe cases. Protocols for deaths. We do not plan for deaths. Our societies do not plan for deaths. The indignity that many dead bodies had to suffer came from a lack of preparation for deaths. Our overwhelming number of demand for mortuaries and bodies lying on the on the floor happened because of our poor planning for mortuaries. In a normal situation also, getting a mortuary bed, as the director of the hospital, any number of days I'll get a call saying that, please, do you have a mortuary bed? So we've not planned for that. So that was essential that we prepared that, get it prepared, but clear endpoint. 3 weeks down the line, open up everything. I do not think lockdown was a total answer indefinitely. Continued lockdown is what led to the mass migration. The workers felt they work on a day-to-day economy. They cannot thrive beyond a certain period of lockdown. So they felt 3 weeks we can handle, we will survive. They stayed on. After 3 weeks, when they felt it was indefinite, mass migration started because their economy doesn't live beyond that. So that started. So if you have clear endpoint, we had given them, the mass migration could have been avoided. Now, the question is, have we done a disaster by opening up when the graph is going up? No. That's why I gave the history of TB. That's why I gave the history of polio. When you have a disease, your technological fix of vaccine is not going to control it forever. Remember, flu has a vaccine. Flu is also a variety of coronavirus. Okay, the vaccine for flu has to be given annually because the efficacy lasts for a short period of time. So your rainbow program for vaccination for other measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, all those conditions, we have not been able to reach 100% across the country. It's a logistic challenge. It's not easy to immunize about 150 million children pan-India. That's not I've been part of the polio program. I know how difficult a logistic issue it was to vaccinate every child under 5 for polio vaccine. It's impossible. So if you have to immunize, imagine all the young and the old with vaccination, you're in for trouble. It is not going to be logistically feasible. It is not going to be economically feasible. The polio vaccine costs only 80 rupees a dose. I wonder, whoever is investing billions in the research for this vaccine, will he give it for 8 rupees? Even 8 rupees, we needed Bill Gates Foundation. For 8 rupees, we needed massive funding from the Rotary and other organizations. So don't think you're going to control this by vaccine. This is going to be controlled only by herd immunity coming on. I was looking at the worldometer graph. Just before the meeting started, I was looking at it. The new cases have been reported from USA, Brazil, Russia, India, Iran. These are the countries having large number of new cases. But what has happened to Italy and other countries? The number of new cases are handful. We still don't have a vaccine. How has it gone down? There is a natural growth of an epidemic. It reaches a peak and there is a natural decay of that epidemic. And that decay depends on the immunity that develops over a period of time. I always equate it to a storm. If you have a storm coming, the old trees fall first, then the disease branches fall, then the poorly constructed houses fall, then the other houses, and killing a certain number of people, and it goes. At the end of it, we start doing a head count, body count, tree count, house count. The epidemic comes like that. It will blow over naturally in about about that much time, and that's what will happen. It will have peaking in between, small peaks, not large peaks, because a large number of people would get the immunity. The debate is what percentage of the population should get infected. Classical epidemiology teaches you 60% of people should be infected to get the protection. However, there are arguments against it now. There are people say even up to 20% is sufficient to bring the graph down slope, and we can do well even with that. So are we worried about the vaccine? I am not too worried. Will it come fast? No, it will not come fast, because you may have the vaccine, you may have the efficacy of the vaccine coming on, but the safety is the paramount importance in any vaccine. Remember, you're not vaccinating a normal diseased person. You can try all kinds of drug, whether it is chloroquine, remdesivir, plasma exchange, what have you, in these diseased persons, because we have nothing else. You have no drug for any viral disease as yet in the world, none. So if you're thinking of the vaccine, There is a safety profile that is paramount, because you're giving it to normal human beings. Even if there is a death in 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000, I wouldn't want to take it if it has a small percentage of risk for the human being. So getting the safety profile of the vaccine is what is going to be critical, and that is not going to come before 1.5 years.
That's
So
right. That's right.
don't
Doctor,
depend on that.
that-
Depend on this thing. But what do you need to do? You need to protect your old trees. You need to protect your disease branches. Elderly. We have a demographic advantage. Younger population. Only 8% of our population is over 65. Therefore, if you protect them, keep them under isolation and protection from the other people that are likely to carry infection to them, keep masks on, keep physical distancing, and your hand sanitization if you're touching foreign objects. Open up your economy. You will do well. Don't worry.
Dr. Varghese at his best, as always. Doctor, please stay with us. We'll come back to you again.
Okay.
I'm sure there will be questions for you. We are also streaming it live on our Facebook page. Just go to your Facebook page and type Urban Update MAG. Questions are also invited. Those who are
I'm
participating
not.
on the Zoom can send it to us on Zoom, or you can write to us on our Facebook page.
Unfortunately,
Moving
I'm not
on,
on any social media.
that is for the participants and audience.
Okay.
Moving on to another doctor on the panel, Dr. Pathare. Dr. Pathare, you are a practicing consultant psychiatrist. Of course, we all know that these lockdowns, long period of confinement to your home, loneliness, spending time with yourself, absolutely lack of socialization has had huge impact on a huge scale in the society. How long do you think such such impact lasts, and how many cases have come to you saying that they are depressed, they are having mental issues, being lonely? Dr. Pathare.
Thank you so much, and thank you for asking me to be on this particular panel. I think we need to really, if we are looking at people, the effect of lockdown on people's mental health, we need to really think of it as different demographics. Okay, so the most vulnerable to the effect of lockdown are going to be people who already have a pre-existing mental health problem. So these are people who are under treatment for mental health problems, who probably were doing pretty okay in normal circumstances. And lockdown has affected them in two ways. Firstly, initially when we had the lockdown, because of supply chain disruptions for medicines and all, there was a period, at least in the first 3 or 4 weeks, when we heard a lot of stories about people not getting their medicines. And so people going off the medicine and ending up becoming ill. So that was one way that people who already have an illness are at risk of becoming ill. And the second thing, obviously, is that people who have a mental illness, and if they were managing in some sort of way, then the stress of the lockdown is twofold. One is that you are cooped up into a small place with your family or with other people, and you don't have any way of having any separate time to yourself, and that causes its own stress, and that has been detrimental to their mental health. So you see a lot of relapses happening also because of that. And the other stress for many people with mental illness is that some of them are barely managing to hold on to a job, or if they did have a job, they were in jobs which are probably most at risk. So there is always this fear that when this lockdown is over, what's going to happen to my job? And given the fact that you already have a disability of some form, getting another job will be difficult. So, it's a combination of all of this, that this group is probably the most vulnerable. The next vulnerable group are people who in normal circumstances just about had head over water. You know, they were barely coping, they were managing, and what the lockdown has now done is it acted like a last straw on the camel's back for them. And so you suddenly see that bunch of people who are becoming ill. And for the vast majority of the rest of us, really, the lockdown is a stress, but it is something that most of us have enough internal resources to be able to handle it. So we are able to handle it. We are able to do a pretty good job of it. Among this other crowd that I'm talking about, the vast majority of us, there is only some people who obviously are at a higher risk. And those are the ones whose jobs are likely to be in trouble. You know, what we know from past experience with economic crisis, for example, in 2008, when we had the economic crisis in Europe, and particularly in Greece, what we know is that in the 2 or 3 years after the economic crisis, Greece's suicide figures went up dramatically. In fact, in 2009, they were up by 17%. In 2010, they were up by 25%. And 2011, they were up by 40%. So clearly, with a certain time lag, you start seeing the effects of the economic crisis in terms of mental health and suicide. From other economic crises, we also know what happens is that after an economic crisis, you see increase in rates of mental health problems, you see increase in rates of alcohol use problems, and you see increases in rates of suicide. So all of these things with a certain lag always happen after a particular period of economic crisis. So I don't want to be a prophet of doom, and I hope that 6 months down the road we don't see this happening in India. But it is something that we should be aware of. You see, COVID caught us unawares. Okay, we probably didn't know this was going to happen, but we couldn't predict what would happen maybe. But with this particular thing, as Dr. Matthews said, and somebody else also said that, you know, the last time we had a pandemic was 100 years ago. So we don't know what happens in a pandemic. The last time we had an economic crisis was only 10 years ago. We actually know what happens to people's mental health in and after an economic crisis. So really, we should be preparing now for a potential mental health crisis 6 months down the road or a year down the road. You know, our mental health system is actually not in very good shape. We need to actually be looking at beefing up our mental health system so that it can address people who have mental health problems. So we need to do something to our health system. But I think more importantly, we also need to take some steps which are outside of the health system. And there are lots of things that one can do outside of the health system to reduce the likelihood of mental health problems. Some of those steps will require money. Some of those steps do not require money. So let's talk about the steps which don't require money. Okay, for example, if we could get our school system and our education system sorted out, and what I'll tell you what I mean by sorted out. There is a tremendous uncertainty in young people currently and in their parents. Are schools going to start? Are they not going to start? Will we have exams? Will we not have exams? Just having a very sensible, planned policy. You know, if we could announce and say to parents and to children, 12 months, for the next 12 months or for the next 24 months, this is how education is going to run. You know, a simple, straightforward policy, which will then at least reduce people's anxieties. And that doesn't require any money. You know, having a very clearly thought through 24 months does not require a lot of money. So that's one example of things we can do to reduce the likelihood of mental health problems without requiring a lot of money. There are other things that obviously require money. One of the best things that we can do to support people is, as one of the professors said earlier, is to ensure that people have income support. Now, I'm not an economist, so I don't know how that income support should be provided and how much is affordable, how much is not affordable. But, you know, in this kind of situation, if we do not provide people with some way of protecting their livelihoods and income support, you're going to see people developing mental health problems. People have debts, people have children, people have families, people have commitments. And if you don't provide that very basic support level to many people, then you will see a lot more mental health issues come up. So, providing income support is not only important to help the economy, it's also important for health. And so health and economy work both together. Bad health will lead to a bad economy, and a bad economic situation leads to bad health. And so you can be caught into a very vicious downward spiral if you don't get out of it quickly. So I think those are some of the things that we should be doing. We should not see, we need an integrated economic and health response. We should not see them as silos. We should say, oh, this is for economy, this is for health. I think a lot of things that you'll do for health will also help the economy. A lot of things that you'll do for the economy will help health. A lot of things that you'll do for education will help health. And some of the things you'll do in health might actually help with education. So I think we need an integrated kind of a response to ensure that we've addressed all parts of the system. And if we do that, then we have some hope of actually sailing through this, not unscathed, but reasonably in good shape at the end of it.
Absolutely, absolutely, Dr. Pathare, spot on. Stay back. We'll come back to you for more questions.
Sure.
Now, time to go to two journalists on the panel who have been waiting patiently for last almost 50 minutes or so. Rajesh Jha from Dhaka and Mr. Ashutosh Pandey in Bonn. Mr. Jha, you are in Dhaka right now. 3 points that I want you to ponder about. One, tell us what is the situation in Bangladesh at the moment so far as COVID-19 is concerned. I was looking at the figure of day before yesterday. The number of positive cases were more than 4,000, and number of fatalities were also quite threatening, given the size and population of the country like Bangladesh. Number two, I would like you to talk about, because you're also, you have been a student of economics as well. There was a SARC fund that was set up with much aplomb, fanfare. All the countries contributed to that fund. What is actually happening? Is actually there is a multilateral cooperation among SAARC countries, or it is mostly bilateral, like India and Bangladesh and Nepal, and so on and so forth? Mr. Jha.
Well, Dhananjay, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be on this esteemed panel. Here in Bangladesh, just today, it has crossed a milestone in terms of the COVID-19 infections. Now it has crossed 1 lakh. So I'll come to the points that you have asked me to ponder over, but let me tell you a few things. Bangladesh is generally known as a poor country. The image in India, as you know, is about Bangladesh is a poor country lacking in so many basic medical facilities and all. And to a great extent, it is correct. And there is no doubt that Bangladesh has one of the highest population densities in the world, and it has been devastated earlier before 71 because of the Pakistani exploitation and problems with that period, and recently because of so many natural disasters, etc., etc. However, in terms of the impact of the COVID-19, I must tell you, before the COVID-19 hit the country in March, the first case in Bangladesh was detected on March 8th. Before that, Bangladesh was actually doing very well. It was actually the fastest growing economy in South Asia, around 8% or so. And now it is being, the IMF and many other international institutions are now saying that there are various estimates. It would be roughly halved. According to some, it would be going to around 4%. Others say that World Bank says it could fall down to even 2%. But nevertheless, the Bangladesh government has been trying its best to counter the situation, to check the situation, and it has adopted a very interesting strategy. The first case, as I told you, started on March 8th, and around March 26th, government started the process, what India called a lockdown. The government of Bangladesh has consistently avoided using the word lockdown. It never said it is going to lock down the country. It said it is declaring a general holiday. It has been using this word right from the day, that is 26th of March, till now. That is the word it has been using. And there have been criticism also about the strategy that the government had adopted, because what happened is that initially, when people started coming from Italy, mind it, a large number of Bangladeshi are in Italy and in the Gulf countries, the government found it very difficult even to put them in quarantine. There were hilarious, in fact, very sad stories of people being asked to go to the quarantine centers, and they're fleeing from those quarantine centers near the international airport. And later the government put army and police and other forces to control them. And slowly it got hold of the situation and started doing things in a different manner. So what it did was that before declaring the general holidays around March 25th, it gave people time. A few days earlier, it announced that it is going to declare general holidays. The schools, colleges, institutions, factories, etc. would be shut down. And that gave people an opportunity to move out of Dhaka. Dhaka is very, very densely populated. And almost a crore of people moved out of Dhaka during those, I think it was a week's time or 5-6 days time from Dhaka to those places. And there was a lot of criticism that government has done a wrong thing. Now they will be spreading the COVID in those places where they go. But this did not result in that kind of a scary situation as we see in many countries. As you see in India, so many people had to travel back and they had to suffer, and that was a big, big problem for them. But at least in Bangladesh, they were able to avoid that. So this was one thing that they did. I don't know how far that was part of strategy, how far they did it because it was necessary or so. Second thing that they did was that this whole thing, lockdown, was never enforced in the manner that it was not a very hard lockdown. Even in places like Dhaka, it was kind of soft lockdown. Of course, colleges, schools, shops, etc. were closed, and there were restrictions. But within a month, the government decided that no, if the people have to be saved from COVID, they have also to be saved from dying because of hunger. Bangladesh is, after all, dependent upon one particular sector, that is ready-made garment sector, for a lot of its income. 84% of the foreign exchange of this country comes from the ready-made garment sector. 4 million people are employed in ready-made garment sector. Roughly 8 million people directly, indirectly depend upon that sector. So government said that within a month, around the end of April, it decided that the factories, ready-made garment factories, would open. Of course, they had that those restrictions, health directives were given to the factory owners that you have to maintain social distancing and all that. And then people came back. And this led to a kind of slow opening of the economy and growth. And they also allowed micro sectors, small economic units to open. And slowly, they have been able to open the economy and let this economic process start. And to tell you the fact, even though around 1,300 40-50 people have died till now, the experience has not been too bad. If you look at the figures, I was looking at the figure, among the countries among the top 20 countries which have reached 1 lakh figure of infection, only India, Russia, these are the two countries which have taken longer than Bangladesh to reach the figure of 1 lakh infections. If you look at the figures that Worldometer and others are putting out. So the experience has not been too bad. Although there are stories around here that people are not getting beds, and ICUs are very few. The total number of ICUs here in hospitals, government around 800 and total around 1,200, 1,300. So these things still remain, but then overall it has not been too bad a situation. So the government's strategy of trying to moderate, trying to keep the economy going while trying to keep the COVID infection also under control has been, I think, not a disaster. It has, I can call it a rather successful strategy for this. The Prime Minister also has been very active. She has been like the commander. Every time she would be instructing people. The political system is also different here because there is just one central government. There is no state government here, so she can direct the district officials and others. She has been taking charge of the entire thing. In terms of the economic package, also you see, government of Bangladesh has been able to set aside right in the beginning around 3% of GDP. Of course, the first thing that it did was to set aside 5,000 crores for payment to the workers in the RMG sector who may not be coming to the factories because of the general holidays or shutdown, as you call it. And that 5,000 crore was given to the factory owners. Of course, it was in the form of a subsidized loan, but that did a great deal of benefit to the workers. So these things, it also gave a lot of money to the industrial sector in terms of, again, interest strategy, interest subsidy. So that has been the strategy of the government, which has been a good strategy so far as Bangladesh is concerned. And the infection is rising here, no doubt. Infection is rising here, and it is rising fast, but it is not still out of hand. If you look at the logarithmic rate of growth of the infections, it is growing and it is becoming a problem. Now it has adopted another strategy, which India is also probably doing. That's the sectoral lockdown. It has divided the country into red, yellow, and green zones, and it has given the authority to the local administration to shut down a particular place. For example, in Dhaka, 2 areas have been declared red zones. Although the government has declared that 45 areas in Dhaka, because Dhaka is the hotspot, 50% of all the cases are in Dhaka city alone. And if you take the Dhaka commissionary, as you call it in India, then it is 80%. That is the hotspot. So it has given the authority to the local authorities to decide about whether it is a red zone or yellow zone or green zone, depending upon the number of infections. And the administration is giving people time to decide and all that. So this has generally been adopted here, and slowly the government is putting more and more localized areas under the red zone and enforcing complete shutdown in those areas. People are not allowed to move out. Government is providing food to them. Government is making medicines available. So that is the broad strategy which this country has adopted. Now, so far as Indian role is concerned, in the month of March, as you know, Prime Minister Modi had a video conferencing with the SAARC leaders, and they decided to have a COVID emergency fund in which India contributed around 10 million. That was the basic first contribution that India made, and then other countries also contributed to that. And the total contribution was around 18 million dollars that has come into that. From that 18 million, India has been providing a lot of, in fact, it has sent 3 tranches of medical supplies to Bangladesh. In the first tranche, they had 30,000 surgical masks, 1 lakh HCQ tablets and things like these. And secondly, there are the 3 tranches and 50,000 sterile surgical gloves, etc., etc. And this has been continuing. But more important thing that India has been doing over this period is that it has been organizing various courses for the people of Bangladesh in terms of capacity building. For example, Dr. Pathare was talking about the psychological health. So it has, this is called AIITech. There is a platform which is international in the sense that it is not just for Bangladesh, but that AIITech platform India has offered specifically for Bangladesh. And currently there are 4 programs running. One is with the help of the Center for Good Governance in Mussoorie, and 3 more with the help of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, AIIMS, Jodhpur. One of the programs is on the mental health. So these programs are currently running. In the past also, large number of 6 courses on various aspects of COVID management have been organized, and there have been regular video conferences between the professionals, and India has been trying to share the best practices of the Indian experience with Bangladeshi people. And this has been continuing. I will have no idea about what the other countries have been doing with that fund, but I presume Bangladesh has been also sending lots of medical supplies to many other countries, including Maldives, Bhutan, to some Arab countries, and so on. And it has been going on. But overall, the cooperation between India and Bangladesh in terms of medical support and all has been quite good. But I would say that in nutshell, Bangladeshi experience of having a graded, moderated, stepwise lockdown and unlocking had seen some successes here. Of course, with a lower level of medical facility and all, you would expect that there would be complaints about people dying and not getting hospital for treatment, etc., which is very common and understandable. But it has, I would say, it has not been so huge as to create a sense of deep fear. There is some apprehension, but not deep fear. So that, in a nutshell, is the Bangladesh story. If you have any other thing in the later part of the discussion, I can always come back.
Well, Mr. Jais, please stay back with us. Mr. Ashutosh Pandey, I really am sorry. I'm really sorry to keep you waiting for so long, but you are at a very strategically located place, that is Germany. Unlike SAARC countries, European Union is a very, very strong political and economic union. Please tell us what impact has been of COVID-19 on German economy in particular, and how the Angela Merkel government has dealt with it, and what has been the effect on the European economy in general. Ashutosh.
Well, Dhananjay, first of all, thanks a lot for having me on this panel. You mentioned about the European Union and how closely knit this organization is compared to, say, a SAARC. But they did have their own testing times when it started, with the countries unilaterally coming up with borders and closing their own borders to ensure that there were no spread of COVID-19 back then. It was all out of panic and paranoia that they erected borders overnight. And also they were found wanting as far as cooperation on how to respond to the crisis is concerned. They came up with rules to curb supply of medical supplies, including Germany, and so slow, and that actually caused a lot of consternation in Brussels, and that's when the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she mentioned that perhaps this is not the way European Union should be reacting in such a case and in such a situation, and perhaps these are the situations where it demands a lot of unity. Slowly, gradually, they got there, and ultimately, we are looking at some sort of cooperation on how to reform the economy or how to go ahead and aid with the recovery process. Now, as far as the taking hit to the economy is concerned, I mean, it's across the board. It's no different here than what we are seeing in the US or what we are seeing in India. Here also, most affected industries are all the industries in the service sector. They have been the most badly impacted. The restaurants, hospitality sector, aviation is another sector that is actually bleeding, because so far some support from the government has been forthcoming, whether it's in France, whether it's here in Germany, although it hasn't been agreed upon so far by the board in Lufthansa. So economically, so far, major impact has happened. But and this impact has been actually felt differently in different parts. I mean, some countries going into this crisis were really in bad economic shape. In fact, the entire Eurozone was in a bad economic shape. They had been hurt by the US-China trade war. They were already reeling from uncertainties related to Brexit. So this crisis has actually come at a really bad time as far as the economy is concerned. Now, some countries like Germany and all, they were fiscally more prudent coming into this crisis, and they did have a lot of fiscal space to deal with it, and that's why we see their response to the crisis has been far disproportionate to what the other members of the European Union or the Eurozone can afford at this point. And if you look at Sweden example, I mean, that's one of the questions that came up here, because they tried another model altogether. They didn't lock down. They kept the economy open. They thought that perhaps that's a way of gaining herd immunity. As we now see that even they did not manage to actually get to herd immunity levels, not even close to that. In fact, Bergamo in Italy, which was one of the epicenters in Italy, northern Italy, they have come closest to what the experts, I'm sure Dr. Verghese would elaborate more on this and he'll have more idea about it. They are closer to what herd immunity is at 56%, according to one of the tests that they've done. So apart from that, if you look at Stockholm, which is badly affected, and now because of that, Stockholm and Sweden, for that matter, have one of the highest mortality rates around the world, and let alone the comparison with their own Scandinavian neighbors. That hasn't happened there. It's been fairly muted as far as the herd immunity is concerned. And their economy locally hasn't done that badly, but now when their dependence on the export markets is also so much that because the export markets elsewhere in Europe and China and elsewhere were affected, so now going forward, that's where the pain is going to be felt as far as Sweden is concerned. France and Italy and Spain, they are actually going to be the worst affected. In particular, Italy and Spain, they were incidentally the epicenter of the virus also in Europe. Their economies are going to suffer, and Italy in particular had a very bad fiscal situation even going into it. And so now it's going to see its debt go up. Now, you mentioned about collaboration, and now coming back to the way the European Union has strung things back together, and they are coming and actually cooperating, and largely at the behest of the largest two economies, France and Germany. So these two economies, they came together and came up with a plan that, okay, the European Union should actually come up with a collaborative effort. And they came up with an unprecedented move. The suggestion is so far that perhaps there would be a common debt issued. I mean, that the European Commission is going to issue the debt, and a bulk of which would be given to the countries which have suffered the most as grants. And now this has been a bone of contention here in Europe, because the countries which have actually managed their fiscal situation really well, like Austria, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, they feel that that's not the right approach to just give away money to certain countries and not expect anything in return in terms of like you should reform your the way you run your business. So that agenda is also going to take some time. I mean, the discussions are going to start on it tomorrow. It's going to be really a protracted negotiation process. We are not sure whether the reform stimulus is going to be passed in in the current form, but there's going to be a lot of haggling there and to and forth. But so the best part of it is that it's been backed by the biggest economies, Germany and France. Germany being the biggest contributor also to the European Union budget. So that's going to be one of the positives as to why experts feel that this reform stimulus, the fiscal stimulus, is eventually going to be passed. Maybe not in the current shape, but eventually that's going to happen. And now, I mean, we are in Europe in a different situation than what's happening in India. Here, the cases, as Dr. Verghese pointed out, have gone down. The cases every day is far fewer than what we had seen during the peak. Now there is this growing sense of people coming out and actually going to restaurants, eating out, even planning to go and use the summer vacations and go and visit some places. They're not going to fly for now. They're keeping trying to explore more of the backyard, to say, if I could say it so. Backyard means their own country. Perhaps they are not flying, but in fact, this time the change in character has been that they are booking more of these holiday homes kind of a thing, and the hotels are not the first choice. So the economy is coming back in shape, but not the way the people would have expected. And I want to point this out, that even after lockdown, we should not expect, like even in India, that people do start coming back to the shops and all. because even here, when we see that there are people who are coming out in the markets because staying indoors had been a lot of too much of an ask for them. So now they're coming out on the streets, but they're not necessarily making purchases. You are seeing long lines in front of stores because there can only be entry for like a limited number of people inside malls. So if you are really dedicated to buying something that day, you go there, or you go make purchases online. So that has changed. Otherwise, the other thing that I want to point out is the way the countries have responded to it. Here, Germany has an advantage because it has actually been commended for the way it responded. The contact tracing was point on, and the fact that the mortality rates have been far less than like the comparative economies. That's because, so that is something that is going to give some sort of confidence among the people, among the shoppers here. That's when they will feel that the country is well prepared, lest another second wave is to happen, or the situation is going to worsen. So that's why you see in Germany that people are stepping out and actually are trying to think of the holiday plans and all. That's the kind of confidence that has been instilled. And that's one of the things that even experts are pointing out, is that perhaps in the longer term, Dr. Verghese pointed out to how important health is. And crucially, now going forward, healthcare is going to be one of the three key criteria for foreign investors to make investments in a country. So that's going to change post-COVID. Right now, if you look at the criteria so far has been regulatory, how skilled your workforce is in a country, or how well spoken they are, how if they can speak in English or other languages. All these are the criteria they've been giving so much importance to. But now there will be a lot of focus even given to healthcare, which was actually not there among the main factors determining an investor's decision to make investments in a country like India or in any other country.
Thank you, Ashutosh. That was you really put it very lucidly, the situation in Europe and where it is heading towards. I have to go to Mr. Dr. Verghese. Dr. Verghese, if you can hear me, I have to ask you. I heard in one of your interview, you said, what is happening is
Yep.
yeah. In one of your interviews, I heard you making a very extremely interesting point, and you said that जो आप देख रहे हैं वो actually कुदरती इलाज है. What you are watching is actually divine treatment. Obviously, we don't have a vaccine, we don't have a medicine for the COVID-19. So, I mean, what is this divine treatment that you are trying to say? If you could explain that, number one. And number two, there's a question from Mr. Abhishek Pandey to you, is India ready now to tackle this pandemic, especially in our metro cities, which seems worst affected?
Thank you so much. First of all, let me clarify. The word kudrati refers to natural. Kudrat is nature. Kudrati is natural healing. Let me explain. Viruses were discovered in the early part of last century. And since the discovery of viruses until today, we have not been able to find a treatment or cure for any viral disease. Zero. You name a viral disease, there is zero cure for this. We have prevention and we have vaccines. So the biggest epidemic, which was the Spanish flu, at that time, medicine was not at all evolved. We had no antibiotics, we had no vaccines other than the smallpox vaccine, which are the rabies vaccine that was there. We didn't have any of those, skills that we have today. Polio, again the same thing. There is no treatment for any viral disease. So what are we talking about? All these drugs. Why is there no treatment? A lot of people don't understand this. A virus, do I have the time to explain? Do I have the
Yeah.
time?
Yeah. You have a couple of minutes. Yes.
Virus by itself has no life. It is a program like a computer software. And that program, once it enters a computer, then it becomes alive and creates the devastating effects within the computer. Same way, a virus, RNA or DNA, enters a cell, enters the nucleus of the cell, becomes a part of the RNA or the DNA within that cell, then starts multiplying. And then it has a life. That multiplication is because it has become part of the human cell and is utilizing the human cell for multiplication. So to kill a virus, a bacteria has its own life. It doesn't need the human cell to multiply. It multiplies on its own. 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to, it multiplies like that. And therefore, you can have an antibiotic for that. There is no antibiotic because to kill the virus, you have to kill the cell. And that's not possible. You can't kill the human, like cancer. We give cancer drugs, we do a lot of other damages to other human multiplying cells. So cancer cells which are multiplying rapidly, they are killed by cancer drugs. But other drugs like loose motions happen, vomiting happens because the most rapidly multiplying cells in our body are in our intestinal tract. So their multiplication is stopped, so you have loose motions and vomiting. Similarly, if you have to kill the virus, you have to kill the human cell in which the virus is residing. That is not possible, therefore we don't have a treatment. The body fights the disease itself by generating antibodies naturally within itself. So every human being, depending on its immunity, develops and is resistant to fight infections, develops antibodies which kill the virus and they overcome the virus. 60% of the people that are infected by coronavirus in the Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier were asymptomatic but infected. So they all solid, good, young people, Marines, very healthy. Their bodies had solid immunity to fight and keep the virus at bay and not produce any symptoms. Okay, so therefore, the healing is natural, not by any drug. We are only giving drugs to reduce the multiplication rate, reduce the entry into another cell, reduce the little metabolism of that virus. That's all, nothing else. That's Kudrati. The second thing you asked me was, are we ready? I go to a hospital every day. We were allocated initially 30 beds. They were full in no time. Then we were asked to increase it to 60, filled in no time. Then we asked it to 120, filled in no time. Today I have been told to keep 200 beds ready for COVID. Do you know the number of phone calls I get from known tos and people that know me that I am part of this? Doctor, do you have a bed in the ICU? Sir, do you have a ventilator free? Do you have a bed in the ICU? So the straight answer to the question, are we ready for the ventilator patients, for the ICU patients, for the high capacity, high flow oxygen? Normal oxygen rate is 2 to 3 liters per hour. High flow oxygen is more than 10 liters per hour. That will empty out your oxygen cylinder, which is large, in 3 to 4 hours. What do? It's a big problem. So are we ready for that? Scaling up? No, we're still on the way to that journey. So it's a little difficult. It is challenging. It is beginning to get overwhelming, but it has not got totally overwhelming. We are just on the edge. It can go this way or that way. So it's very important, while we have opened up, we protect our elderly, we protect our people with diabetes, hypertension, renal disease, cancer treatment patients who have poor immunity. We have to protect them. So the campaign has to be protect them at large. We also have to protect our healthcare workers. And that's something which was not understood. Only PPEs, personal protective equipment, is not sufficient. I have looked at statistics of countries all over. And I'll take 1 minute on the Swedish experiment also. You know what I found? In a country, in a place like Hong Kong, zero infection among healthcare workers in Hong Kong. And after the first 1.5 months of Wuhan, there were 43,000 322 healthcare workers imported to Wuhan to help in the massive operation. Not one of them got infected. You know the problem today? My department, so many of my healthcare workers, yes, day before yesterday, I went for a funeral of my healthcare worker. Because when we analyze it, we realize probably there's something beyond the personal protective equipment, and that is environmental management for management of airborne diseases. And we have been trying to promote this environment of a negative pressure environment in all areas where COVID patients are kept. So we need to look at it in that technology within hospitals or wherever we are keeping our COVID patients, so that the healthcare workers is protected. And that's a special asset. We are running out of healthcare workers for hospitals now as we are scaling up. So we are a little late in that, but it's still time to develop that. That's what I would say. Are we ready? No, not yet. We still need a little more time to be developed. Last comment on the Swedish model. The Swedish model has been a completely different model. It has been a model of lateral thinking compared to, it's very, very difficult when everyone is following one way to follow the other way. You have to have real guts. And the epidemiologist, he was very, very pragmatic in his understanding of herd immunity. They had a high mortality initially, and that high mortality was related to, they have elderly population, which is more than about 20% plus, the very vulnerable one. They are all housed in old age homes. They are not living in families like we have in India, Bangladesh, and Southeast Asia region. They are in old age homes. And there, they did not prevent the healthcare workers or the families of these people visiting them. So what happened? These people carried the infection to them. So their early mortality was all in these old age homes. And it was a huge spike. So the media, politicians, everyone was criticizing the Swedish government for their stupid model. But their economy kept running, not at the full pace. And as Ashutosh said, yes, significantly affected because exports are affected, imports are affected, all kinds of things are affected. But their restaurants did not stop running, their bars did not stop running, their hotels did not stop running, their public transport did not stop running, and there was no migration also. They continue to operate. Their high mortality rate has come down. They still have a spike, but it is not as sharp a spike, a gradient, as you would imagine if everything is open. So that is a different model. So we need to look at how do we deal with this? How do we develop herd immunity? So the point is, if you have lockdown continuous, you're only delaying the herd immunity and prolonging the epidemic. Therefore, it is better to open up earlier and protect our vulnerable groups. And that's what Sweden did. And that is what kept their economy in the specific sectors which have been affected severely. Restaurants, so many of them are sold out. Hotels, they're just petrified. What is going to happen to us? The airline industry, it's all up for sale.
Thank you, Dr. Verghese. As I can safely say that there's a consensus kind of thing that let's not look at things in silos. Economy of health and health of the economy. We need to look at them together,
Yes.
not separately.
Absolutely.
Therefore, and so far as India is concerned, our preparedness is concerned, we need to do a lot. And that is a process that will take time, as Dr. Verghese has said. Let me thank all my panelists, Professor Sudipta, Professor Dipankar Basu, Dr. Verghese, Dr. Pathare, Mr. Rajesh Jha in Dhaka, Ashutosh Pandey in Bonn, Germany. I'll be back with you next Thursday, same time at 6 p.m. India time. Till then, see you. Goodbye.
Thank you.